Holman joining us for Behind the Headlines. Karen, thanks for making the time.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
I thought we would talk about some big items this week having to do with development, which has been a long and very influential issue in Palo Alto. It certainly kind of governed the election for the council last fall and has had a major impact this year. This week was kind of a banner week, I would say, for at least some on the council who were pushing for regulation of chain stores as well as office cap. So how is this? Is this a significant week for you since you've been a slow growth proponent for a while?
Well, in addition to slow growth, though, I've also been a strong advocate for retail for many years, and especially local independent businesses. So for me, it's like, yeah, I feel very, very satisfied, happy, gratified, put in whatever adjective there because of the ordinance that was passed last Monday night, and really appreciate the support of council. It passed unanimously. And so that particular ordinance, for anybody who doesn't know, was to protect the California Avenue area from an overwhelming number of chain stores, or sometimes they're referred to as formula. So just to be clear, that doesn't mean that anybody that's here has to leave, and doesn't mean any new formula stores wouldn't be allowed, but they would have to be approved through a conditional use permit. So we can manage and balance the types of uses that are here that better serve the community and better also support the local businesses and the non-chain stores. So I'm very pleased, yeah.
Okay, I just want to ask a quick question about the specifics of this ordinance. And you, of course, mentioned some of them, but Cal Avenue right now has, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 maybe chain stores. And they've done kind of surveys in the lead up to this ordinance, which shows that a lot of people would rather see like a mix of chain and kind of mom and pop independent stores and not eliminate chains altogether. And we haven't seen any protests like outside Subway or FedEx or anything. So
Starbucks.
yeah, no Starbucks protests. So you mentioned like the solution that the council adopted, but I'm hoping to ask you, like, what is the problem? To quote former Councilman Larry Klein, what are you guys trying to solve here?
Well, the advantage of this is sometimes we get a problem and it's too late to try to solve it. You can't after the fact. It's just, the horses out of the barn, so to speak. So in this occasion, yeah, the surveys indicated that most people seem to think there's about the right amount of formula stores right now. And you do want some of those because they can be destination places. But if we just let it go to market forces, rents are going to increase and only the formula stores are maybe going to be able to afford the rent. So it's one of the reasons I'm really gratified about this is it's an occasion where we're getting in front of an issue that hasn't yet happened to be a problem.
Yeah, I thought that characterization was pretty apt that you're trying to prevent a problem,
yes,
both on California Avenue and then, interestingly, I think, on Cambridge Avenue, where we are.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to address something that's perhaps already an issue or has already passed. Although some people would say that there's been some harm done on the avenue with loss of touches and some and
right,
a florist and because of
right,
residents.
I wouldn't say that. I think Vitality Gold.
Vitality Gold is a franchise.
That's true. So
Also
there might not be a second Cal Avenue anytime soon.
Yeah, I did want to touch upon the Cambridge Avenue aspect. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say about California Avenue. We only have so much control. The market forces are still going to be at play. So we can't say that the forest is going to come back to California Avenue. We can't say, specific uses like that are going to come. But I think what this does do is it helps potentially at least moderate rents that could be charged that a chain store could pay. So I think we're going to, at least in those ways, kind of support. Government moves slowly. So if something had happened on California Avenue where we really were like behind the gun, or in front of the gun, I should say, we move slowly. It's just how government is. It's a very public process, as it should be, but that also means it's a slow process. So that's why this is really so very important.
One of the strongest advocates for this was Jessica Roth, who has the European Cobblery shoe store.
Not just the Cobblery. She corrected me.
Oh, I'm sorry. What is it? The Cobblery?
I think they dropped European out of their name.
Okay. They have nice shoes. European and otherwise, I suppose. So it's really, and she kind of typifies the kind of business owner that I think the city council was listening to in this case, independence, the unique, quirky kind of businesses that Palo has fewer and fewer of these days.
Not just the retailers though, but also the neighborhood, because the survey that I think Jessica and others did along the avenue, people who came in and were their patrons talked about how much they wanted. Also, the local independent businesses wanted to keep the character of California Avenue. So it's to support the retailers, but also to support the community, which means, of course, the community has to continue to support those businesses.
That's
We can't overlook that.
That's true. One of the speakers on Monday was Larry Scarcett, who owns the Cambridge Barber Shop, and I guess he and his father, his late father, owned the business for quite a while. So the extension of retail protections to Cambridge Avenue, I think it's pretty interesting because we have been here for 6 years or so, and if you look at the street, there's a lot of parking space. There's a lot, there's garages. I would say probably half, maybe a third to a half of the frontage is all parking. So the council decided to extend ground floor retail protections to Cambridge Avenue. I wonder if you could just address that a little bit. Again, I know you're getting in front of a problem and trying to make sure that people like Larry Scarcett aren't pushed out.
Well, again, no one's going to be made to leave. And so the conditional use permit, which is a discretionary approval for some of the uses like hair and nail salons, which often get to be a target because they proliferate, especially in down economic times. It's just to see that we don't have a proliferation of something to the exclusion of other kinds of uses. What we did add to the ordinance, and as the maker of the motion, is that if the parking lots get developed, that there would be retail on the ground floor of those parking lots as well to help support retail. You know, it's often said by people who've been in the property management business for a long time that office supports retail. So I could see Cambridge Avenue as being a good mix of ground floor office and retail. Again, no one's being forced to leave. I'm really hoping that there can, that we can find some way, or some property owners will find a way to, especially on what would be the east end of Cambridge, put in some retail that will help support Molly Stone. The post office is theirs. It's also a lot of pedestrian traffic there, and there's a couple other retailers there. So it'd be great if we could focus on that end as well to generate some retail.
Are you concerned that this is just going to add a lot more work for staff and the city council, as you know, have quite a few projects? I mean, if the director has to kind of review their applications, and then if anybody contests, this is going to go to the council, which you guys put forward here. And I know it's all hypothetical because this is just kind of having taken effect, but is that at all a concern?
Well, workload on staff's always a concern. It's within balance. But I think the goals of this, are going to be, so much in the public favor that I don't anticipate a lot of controversy around it. And I think there's so much community support for this kind of measure that I'm hoping it won't put a lot more stress on staff.
And I think it's also kind of interesting. Cal Avenue, as you know, has been just the focus of a lot of change in the last few years. Some of it caused by the city, some of it caused by the market. There's construction everywhere, and there was this huge streetscape project. And at that time, various council members were talking about wanting to make it more like University Avenue over Castro Street, kind of more vibrant, robust. I feel like this ordinance kind of looks at it from another direction. It's almost to preserve status quo and kind of make it less like University Avenue, those kinds of places. So I'm just curious, so what is your vision for Cal Avenue's future? Is a mix of those two? Is it closer to Castro Street, or is it something more quaint and neighborhood serving, which the focus of this ordinance seems to be?
I think you said it in your last statement that it's more, nothing's going to be status quo because there will be change. People will retire who own businesses, and decisions will be made. So they're out of our control, and it's an organic evolution. But that's what I think the neighborhood and the retailers have said that they want, is they want an organic evolution and not a development thrust that's going to change the character of California Avenue, the shopping area, in a short period of time.
This isn't the first action that the council took this year regarding retail preservation. It was the urgency ordinance preventing conversion of retail space to other uses. Was that extended after June into an ordinance?
It will be.
It's still out there.
Yeah.
Okay. And briefly, that extends to the entire city in terms of current retail space not becoming. It
covers, for anybody who doesn't know, it covers the conversion of any retail or personal service to any other use. and that's a citywide ordinance. And the reason is because marketplaces do change. You know, our personal shopping manners change. You know, online has had a big effect. And so until we can get ahead of that, to the extent that we can, in all reality, we wanted to put this ordinance in place to help preserve what we have. We rely on sales tax dollars from retail, and the community relies on those services being accessible, you know, by foot, by car, by bicycle, whatever. So, you know, again, we're trying to get ahead of, or at least monitor and manage what the development community is doing and what the marketplace is doing. So it's always a balance.
I was looking back at your endorsement video from last fall,
Oh.
and one of the things that you had remarked about in regards to retail was that there's a proliferation of restaurants downtown, and sometimes they're taking over retail, sales type shops. And I'm wondering, is there anything more in your mind that you would like to see accomplished this year in terms of retail preservation, or could be done in the future?
I still have the view that we're a little out of balance downtown, that we have too many restaurants. We all like to be able to go out to eat. We all like to be able to have, you know, an assortment from which to choose. But the problem is, well, it's twofold really, is parking restaurants have a great parking demand. But the other thing is that if you have a proliferation of anything, not to pick on restaurants, but
Nail salons.
in any particular use, if you have a proliferation that's too great, they displace other retailers and other services. So I still think there are too many restaurants downtown. There's nothing to prevent more from coming. I don't think there's political will downtown or even California Avenue to limit the number of restaurants. So
if there were political will, what would you say is a mechanism for bringing a good balance?
Well, you know, it's again balance, and you don't want to push businesses out that exist. But I think, you know, we could limit the number of square footage that is devoted to restaurants, either California Avenue or University Avenue downtown area, so that we don't increase that square footage, for instance.
Well, that's a cap. That would be a great segue. If we're done with retail, to go into the office cap.
So you're not talking about clothiers now?
Not caps. So this week another decision was arrived at council level. It was interesting because at the same time that was done, there was also kind of an amendment, a side issue having to do with the pipeline projects. Gennady, maybe you can recap that.
Yeah, it was one of the more contentious unanimous votes we've had in a little while. The council unanimously approved 50,000 square foot annual cap on office and research and development in the three kind of big commercial areas, not including Stanford Research Park, which is basically downtown, Cal Avenue, and El Camino. But in addition to approving that, the council also split 5-4 on the mechanism for deciding who falls under the cap. Mayor Holman was one of the 4 dissenting members who kind of went along with the original kind of a proposal, which was to have these clear criteria, what they call a beauty contest, things like design, traffic impact, and use those criteria to decide which falls under the cap. But the majority, the 5 council members, switch that to kind of what's in the pipeline right now. We'll get to go to the head of the line. So there was a lot of controversy with that, and there was a lot of kind of actually dispute as to whether this really weakens the entire effort. And I was hoping to get actually Mayor Holman's thoughts on that, because the Councilman Burt was pretty clear in him thinking that this kind of undermines the very idea of the cap, that you don't get to have this beauty contest. I'm curious if you share that view.
Well, I don't think it. Thank you for that summary. I don't think, and it's quite accurate, as your articles always are. So I don't think it undermines the cap, but it does certainly undermine. You know, the beauty contest is a very kind of crude way to describe it. But
Very Donald Trump.
Oh, please. But it does undermine the ability to have some kind of criteria other than just zoning, which, you know, we're doing the comp plan update, right? Zoning and what our criteria should be for approving projects. So that aspect of it definitely got undermined. So we still have the square footage cap of new office, but we don't have the criteria that I think the community would be fully supportive of. in terms of helping to assuade developers, applicants to come up with more complementary, let's say, projects to the community.
One thing that I didn't quite understand was that, okay, so there's 4 projects currently in the pipeline, and I forgot who it was, but somebody was saying that this basically guarantees their approval, but there's certainly a process that they are going to go through, unless they're so far along that, that they're almost about to get permits or something. There's still a process that will govern traffic impacts and design
Right.
and such. Is there not?
Right. Yeah, that would apply to any project, whether they would go through the, we'll call it still, the beauty contest or these pipeline projects. They still have to go through environmental review. They still have to go through, I don't think any of these are subject to HRB, but they're all subject to Architectural Review Board. And they're all subject to appeals, any mitigations that might be identified in any environmental analysis. So, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the debate was, actually the 2 biggest projects are the ones by J. Paul right here in the Cal Avenue area, which we just talked
Right.
about, contributing
Yes.
to the growth and vitality. But they actually had to have a full EAR, and so their application's already been deemed complete by the planning department, so they're kind of pretty far along in the process. And that was one of the main points of the decision, is
Right.
to give people who are so far along in the process, not
Right.
make them wait. But I think the debate was not whether they'll be approved, but whether they'll be exempt from the cap, whether they're kind of, these are the ones that are kind of be green lighted, assuming they provide all the mitigations and things like that. And there's also a few other smaller projects
Right.
that are one downtown and one in El Camino. But
Right.
I think the bulk of the impact will be here in Cal Avenue, just like with the other ordinance.
Yeah, instead of it being
Yeah.
exempt from the cap, they're taking up the cap.
Pretty
Right.
much, yeah.
Because there's
Right, yeah.
60-something thousand square feet
Yeah, I think
that's coming up.
this pretty much almost guarantees that in the next year or maybe 2 years, Cal Avenue will be the focus. Will be kind of taking almost all the cap space in the first year and at least in the second. So I'm curious whether that's troubling, because Cal Avenue, as you've seen from the figures from planning, is already having like development through the roof compared to the other 2 areas.
It is. It is, and it is a concern. And, the city council has, at least in the study session fashion, even identified a location in this area for a potential public safety building. So that could be coming along. We don't know how far out in the future they'll be, not exactly in the Cal Avenue area, but not so far south. The Fry's site will certainly undergo a transformation, and I think that's a great opportunity. But it will be a change, and it will surely be some kind of intensification. I'm hoping it's not just my voice in this. I hope it will still be around at that point in time, but I'm hoping it's not just going to be a housing and office and retail mix. I think we could do something a whole lot more creative. It's one of the largest parcels yet to be in Palo Alto that hasn't undergone some kind of change in the last many years. So I would really look for something like an arts district or something like that to be created there. Doing something very creative and, with the cooperation of a property owner, of course, and supportive community. So it'll be a process, but I would be very saddened if it just came through as a standard retail office housing project. I think the opportunities are just far greater than that.
So you think it's something more like sofa-ish, with like a little park, maybe some...
Well, they'll have to create some open space anyway, some parkland, because of the size of project it is. There'll be a requirement for that, according to city ordinances. But yeah, and it could be a little mini sofa process, yeah.
And of course, this whole office cap proposal has been pretty controversial, not just in this particular clause we were just talking about, but community-wide. I mean, a lot of the big businesses, Stanford Research Park was pretty adamant before they were excluded. But even within downtown, Palo Alto Forward's against it, came out against it. Companies like HP, Palantir, even the Chamber of Commerce, which lately hasn't really been involved in many of the debates, they actually took the rare stance and kind of went against it. And the Planning Commission had 2 go-arounds, and they kind of grudgingly approved it on the second time. The first time, they were pretty opposed to it as well. And one of the big concerns was that by focusing on the interim ordinances like this one, which would last 2 years or till comp plan is completed, the city's kind of losing focus of the kind of greater strategic efforts, the hashing out of the long-term vision, the update of the comprehensive plan, the creation of specific area plans. Do you share that concern? Do you think that these kinds of Band-Aid approaches kind of take the city's eye off the kind of longer-term prize?
I don't think so, because it's what I was saying earlier. that, if the horse is already out of the barn, then, what have you got? So I think these kinds of interim measures in the California Avenue, which is a permanent ordinance, those kinds of measures actually help with the comprehensive plan process and doing the longer range planning, because it's a moving target. If we just let things go as they are now, and we're so very fortunate to have a healthy, vibrant economy, and with that also come challenges. And so if we don't put some kind of, some would call them stopgap measures in place, what's the comp plan, advisory committee going to be doing? What's staff doing? So are they chasing something that, because it's changing all the time? So I think this provides some stability on which, we can do some planning. So I don't think so.
Okay. And speaking of chasing something all the time, I want to ask you about the comp plan update, which has been chased since 2006. The City Council earlier this year adopted that as one of its priorities, more council focus and trying to get it done.
Right.
Back then, the goal was to kind of get it done by 2016. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. We're now thinking 2017. I wanted to ask you if you're satisfied with the way the process is going now, or whether you're more confident in the update process. Okay. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's gotten off to, quite frankly, a little bit of a rough start, maybe.
The first decade?
Well, I mean, this goes back to when I was on the Planning Commission, when it was started, and so it's, I don't even need to comment about that. It's been a long time coming, but I think, putting it as a council priority, and I think Hillary's doing a good job leading this effort. Hillary Gittleman, Planning Director, and leading this effort. I think we have a good, diverse group of citizens on the Citizen Advisory Committee now. They're public meetings. Anybody can come and have a voice there. I went to the last CAC meeting, and they spent probably a good hour or more just on process. And I'm kind of a process nerd, so while I want to get,
sing?
What's that?
Did it make your heart sing?
Well, I can't say that, no, but it did make me feel good that they were addressing those kinds of issues, because, better to do it up front and after everybody's seated than try to address those kinds of things as they are into the process. So I'm hoping now they can focus on actually the work of the comp plan update, with all of that as a backdrop and as a platform in which to spring.
And they had a pretty fascinating discussion at that meeting about transportation. One of the things I like is that right now it has co-chairs. It started out as chair. And it's your former Planning Commission colleagues, Dan
Yes, both of
Garber
them.
and Arthur
Yes,
Keller,
yes.
who kind of
My tribe.
who in many eyes are kind of like represent the two different sides. One is a little more open towards development. The other one is more closer to residentialists and more likely to attend your campaign party. So I feel like part of the anxiety over the CAC initially from the community is there's too many pro-development people, not enough people from the residentialist perspective, and that's been kind of one of the subplots over the last couple of years, this kind of whole idea that there's a split between kind of residentialists and others. I'm curious whether this is a narrative that you kind of accept, whether you think that's the case. I mean, you're often kind of thought of as one of the kind of leading residentialists, and I'm curious what you think of that and whether that's an applicable term and what does it even mean to you?
I'm not sure, actually, and I said this even back last year in the campaign, is I'm not sure the relevance of the term residentialist, because it used to have one meaning, and I'm not sure it has the same meaning now. I mean,
Voting no against
it's a
projects,
different
right?
place.
Voting no against developments?
I've always said that I'll vote for any project that meets the standards and is a good benefit and complement to our community. And those that aren't and are asking for a lot of exceptions and don't seem to match and marry with our regulations, I'm not shy about voting against them. So I'm very forthcoming about that, and I've spent a lot of time on Planning Commission and Council both doing that very thing. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Do you think that those who may be perceived as being on the other side, people from Palo Alto Forward or even the Planning Commission, would also say, though, that they're in favor of projects that benefit the community? It's just a matter of what you view beneficial. Maybe more density would be beneficial to some people.
Well, the basis, we do have a comp plan, right? And we do have zoning code, and we do have CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act, that measures impacts and stuff and such. So it's not my personal preference. As you both know, it's like I come from the graphics world, so I have an aesthetic sense that I would like to be gratified. At the same time, I look to the comprehensive plan, the zoning code, and CEQA to determine whether a project is a good project or not. And there are findings that have to be made in terms of compatibility. You know, we have a lot of rules and regulations in place, and I think if we, you know, emphasize those more, some of the guidelines that the ARB has, for instance, they're guidelines, not standards, so they don't feel fully empowered. So I think if we, you know, El Camino design guidelines, they're guidelines. I think if we, and I know this is what staff's working towards too, if we put those into more the realm of standards, we'll have a better outcomes. There's still guidelines that still need to be included in terms of findings, but they've been a little mushy, and so I think we can get there to have better projects that we can all better support. So what you may be getting at is that there are a lot of people who want very dense housing projects. There's some people who want just less development, whatever it is, and some people who you know, think office is a great complement to our community, and office supports retail and the community. So again, I look to the comp plan really for the base guidance in those regards.
A couple webcasts ago, publisher Bill Johnson said that he thought that the difference in kind of outlook of the Planning Commission from the council was the political story of the year. And I'm just wondering what you think about that, you know, difference in viewpoint that we've seen materialize this year between the PTC and the council.
Well, I don't know if it's the story of the year or not. I think what happens is when there's a big turnover on any board or commission, which there has been on the Planning Commission, and this is not intended to be disrespectful of anyone, we have planning commissioners who don't have a lot of depth of experience in the planning process. And so I think some of the things that people come up with may be good ideas, but what are they grounded in? You know, are they feasible? Are they doable? You know, are they grounded in our comprehensive plan or zoning? Is there a perspective that, you know, we looked at that 8 years ago and it really didn't fly, so let's not go there again, or have things change so that we can go there again. And to kind of go along with that, you know, institutional memory is a little thin on the part of staff too. And so I think it's more a level of experience than it is necessarily about perspectives. You know, we have different perspectives about 50-foot height limits. Well, why do we have a 50-foot height limit, for instance? And what are the pros and cons of that? So there's some of it is definitely a matter of some people are more density supportive and other people aren't. But I think if we can just bring it all down to, you know, what's worked, what hasn't worked, where have we come from, what's been discussed, and why is something whether not going to work or is it going to work. So it's a little bit like Maybell. It's a little bit like that.
Maybell development from a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Subject of a referendum.
It's a little bit like that, I think.
Okay.
You know, this year, of course, you're the mayor and Greg Schmidt is the vice mayor. And as anybody who's seen you guys, you know, at meetings would know that you're very much a policy wonk. He's very much a kind of a data junkie. So the fact that you guys are kind of attacking an office cap, this seems to be kind of a right year. And these issues have been around for years and years. But I feel like the last few months, you guys have been, the council has been kind of getting into the nuts and bolts of ordinances. And as a result, most meetings have gone well past midnight, 12:30. There's been a lot of hours put in. So I guess my question for you is being a mayor still fun?
Being a mayor is, well, thank you for the question. So being the mayor it's an honor and it's a privilege and it is fun, and it's an awful lot of work. And when I moved from Planning and Transportation Commission to the City Council, I mean, you know, I did my due diligence at Planning Commission and I watched a lot of stuff at Council, and so I thought I was fully prepared, but it's a big difference. And because I wasn't vice mayor, maybe, I wasn't prepared either quite for how much work it is to be mayor. And it's as much as you want to make it, right? You go to as many events as you can do, and the last several mayors have not worked during the time that they've been mayor. I have not either. So I've tried to be at as many events and, you know, show up at events that are honoring staff members as well, and try to be as supportive of kind of community entities and staff and endeavors that are ongoing in the community. So, you know, it's as much work kind of as you make it, and allow it to be quite frankly. And it's all great fun. It's great privilege. It's, you know, to go to block parties and get to visit with people in ways that you don't get to normally.
You could do that without staying up to 12:30 talking about office gaps. Just go to the party. But,
Well, well, yes and no, but it's
you-
also why we're doing the neighborhood meetings. You know, there was a colleague's memo earlier in the year about neighborhood town hall meetings, and so we're going to do 2 of those yet this year. Because when members of the public come to council meetings, they can bring up any subject they want to at oral communications, but we can't respond. So if we go to the community and have town hall meetings and it's the community's topics, then we can actually have a back and forth dialogue. And I think that's a way to really find out what's the community thinking, what can we learn, are we responding well, are we getting ahead of issues. You know, I've often been known to say, like, we have experts who look at traffic, we have experts that look at, you know, densities and that sort of thing, but nobody knows a neighborhood better than the people who live in it. And I think that's a value of going to block parties. You get an earful, positive and negative, you know. And going to town hall meetings, I think, will be that, you know, amplified.
Well, since we've moved off the topic of development, I think we're in our lightning round now. So go ahead, Gennady.
So this is when I get to ask you questions.
Yep.
We can go back and
Pepper
forth. I just have one quick one. I mean, during your State of the City speech, you kind of highlighted 2 attributes that the city needs to have to address its challenges. One was entrepreneurship, the other one is stewardship. And I know when it comes to the latter one of the issues that you've just become really concerned about is the drought's impact on trees. So what's happening with that?
Well, I think we have had a little bit too much of a competing interests here. We have, rightly so, you know, a real focus on reducing our water consumption. We are in drought. It's the 4th year of a drought, so it's a serious concern that needs to be taken seriously. At the same time, you know, I mentioned the word balance earlier in terms of development or whatever. It also needs to be kept in the context of we have a canopy that, you know, Palo Alto is identified, you know, by its canopy in many ways.
So has Palo Alto gone too far in the conservation direction in your view?
I wouldn't say it that way. I wouldn't say that Palo Alto has gone too far in the conservation effort. I think it's gone. It hasn't done as good a job as it really should and really needs to in terms of educating the public that trees need drink, they need water. Going up Middlefield Road, for instance, it looks like maybe half the trees are stressed. And I mean, I can't imagine a Palo Alto with, let's just use a number here for, it's not going to happen, but just use a number. Imagine a Palo Alto with half the canopy, a third of the canopy. Trees, and I know you all know this, but, you know, trees, you know, purify the air. They actually help conserve water because they provide shade. They're traffic calming measures. They increase property values. I mean, on and on and on.
They make for a good symbol of the city, too.
They do. We ought to think about that.
Yeah, Parks and Rec Commission is going to discuss this topic on Tuesday. But since we are in lightning round, would you like to hit the mayor with another lightning
Could
round?
I add one more thing about trees? There's a reason that when people are mayor, they get a tree planted for them.
Oh.
So, you know, it is a very nice thing, but it's not
wasn't even
something
aware.
else.
There's
It's
a
a
Campbell
tree that
tree?
gets planted, yes, outside the Rinconada Library and across from the Art Center. So I didn't pick it, but it's a perfect place for
That's pretty
for
cool. I
me.
did not know that.
Yeah.
Well, we can talk about the transportation tax. Oh, we're getting out of time, but real quick, since we did talk to Tom Du Bois last week about the transportation tax coming up, it seems like Palo Alto is gearing up for something of a fight over the priorities for spending.
Did you say fighting over? I didn't.
Yeah, gearing up for a fight
Okay.
over priorities for spending, since we've seen historically where the funding has gone. What, in your opinion, is going to be the next couple of steps that Palo Alto needs to do in order to ensure that its interests are being looked after and that it justifies the support for a tax next year?
Well, there were 11 mayors and city managers that wrote a letter to VTA that I know you're aware of, asking for a study to be performed so that we could identify what projects would be the most, would accomplish the most in terms of congestion relief, as Jocelyn states it well. And VTA's response was, well, you know, the tax measures coming up next year, we don't really have time to do a comprehensive study. So, you know, that's sort of putting the cart before the horse. There's also, yes, about 80% of the 2 prior measures went to BART in San Jose. The whole rest of the county has projects that need to be done. Last numbers I saw, the transportation projects that were submitted, the list of projects that were submitted to VTA amounted to about $50 billion, when the tax measure is expected to bring in $6 billion. So that brings up for me a question. As you said, I'm kind of a process nerd, or I said that, I guess. And so how are those projects going to be prioritized? If there's not a study, which ones are the most effective, and what are the criteria? In the past, a lot of times what the criteria has been used is housing density. Palo Alto has jobs density. So where does that fall in line in terms of selecting the projects and prioritizing them? So there's a lot to be learned yet, and we've even floated the idea, to whatever extent, about maybe doing our own tax measure. So we haven't put that out there yet as like, yes, that's what we're going to do, but we need to look out for what's best for our community as a regional partner and member. We're not trying to do this in contrast to another entity. We're just trying to look at what really makes the most sense and how can we accomplish the most benefit.
Are you and the other mayors continuing to meet or coalesce around this issue?
It's a continuing dialogue, and we've also had some dialogue with East Palo Alto Menlo Park because there's Dumbarton Bridge and the traffic that comes both ways on that every day as well. That impacts, and again, you can't draw a line and it's like, here's where traffic stops. But the Dumbarton Bridge, for instance, affects cities up and down the peninsula. Caltrain, of course, is one of our priorities, and getting that undergrounded would be our first priority and first wish. So, yeah.
All right. Do you have another question?
I was curious what the mayor thinks of the bus rapid transit. I know it's something that the council discussed in the past, but it's been a while, and I feel like this issue is coming to the fore again. There's going to be a decision made, looks like December, January timeframe, on possibly dedicated lanes in El Camino and Palo Alto, which would obviously have a huge effect, but...
It would have a huge effect on a lot of different fronts, and it's had mixed results. As you look up and down the county, it's had mixed results, mixed support. It's maybe I couldn't count off the top of my head the number of cities that oppose it. A couple of cities have been in support of it, but if it was a middle lane, here we're back to trees again. It takes out all the median trees. And what is the ridership? What are the prognosis for it? I read something the other day saying that, and it was one person from VTA saying that they might even rob some money rob being the figurative word here, from the 2016 ballot measure to complete BRT, bus rapid transit, if it were approved and recommended by the city. So yeah, I think it has a long ways to go before it garners a whole lot of support up and down the peninsula. I can't say what this council in Palo Alto feels about it.
You personally?
I'm not a great fan of it. No.
You don't like being figuratively robbed? Yeah. Okay.
So yeah.
We're definitely going to have you come back for another webcast to discuss more issues.
I would appreciate that. Do we have just a moment to mention
Do your
this?
mayorly duties.
As I said earlier, and we talked about retail for a fair amount, there is an event downtown on October 8th, Thursday evening from 5 to 9. And we hope that this event will be successful enough that we can take it around town. This is an event on Emerson, Ramona, and Bryant Street, and the streets will be opened up to pedestrians only. And it's an event for, by, and about the retailers. It's about the merchants, restaurants, and merchants. And so we're looking forward to it being a very exciting, very vibrant event. There'll be entertainment there as well, but this really is not an event that closes the street for something else. This is an event that opens the street to pedestrians for the benefit of the merchants, and we're looking forward to it. I want everybody to come.
Sounds like fun.
That wraps us up then. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you
Mayor
for the
Holman.
invitation. Appreciate it.
You can check us out on paloaltoonline.com and on Twitter @PaloAltoWeekly.